Have you read or played Agents of Concordia? Join in the discussion.
Well, let's continue with our progress through Agents of Concordia. Alright, so let's backtrack a little bit for some context. If you haven't seen the first video, maybe it won't be necessary to go back. So on page 7 of Agents of Concordia, we have Primer, the story. And it told us that the Agents of Concordia game is centered around the CCI, which is the Concordia Central Intelligence, an agency charged with the protection of a vast fantasy multiverse. We're going to find different levels of technology, but we're also going to find magic in this game. Earth exists as more or less as we know it, but the conceit of this game is that it's 1964. So Earth is kept in the dark about all of the stuff that's going on. Again, a kind of callback to different parallels in Luther Arkwright that have no idea that the disruptors exist, and so on and so forth. Or Men in Black, people don't know that aliens are real. This is a very workable approach. Gives you something to lose, gives you something to maintain and preserve, enhances the threat of threat. So the year is 1964, and the multiverse, as was shown to us in the map at the beginning of the text, the multiverse is in a sense arrayed along a long axis. At one end of this axis is this place of terrible beings, hungry and rapacious, that seem hell-bent on driving down the axis to get to its other end, which is the singularity, the place where all the magic of the universe flows. It flows through the entire universe and finally goes down the drain of the singularity. Earth is the last stop before the singularity. So all of these horrific things and all of these different beings of the multiverse, in a sense, all roads lead to Earth, and Earth has no idea this is going on. The gateways to Earth are controlled by Concordia Prime, which is the central meeting place of all of the beings that you can sit down and have conversations with, rather than fight off these kind of these horrific beings from somewhere else. This is Concordia Prime, and the home of the CCI. So we left off last time before talking about the rules. So let's review. We are going to have the opportunity to earn or purchase or be saddled with flat modifiers of +3 or -3. And we are rolling d12s. Okay. We will roll maybe 1 d12, maybe 2, or maybe 3. And the number is dependent on our skill level. You roll them, and you choose one of the dice to keep. And you add your bonuses or penalties from abilities, equipment, and conditions to that rolled number, and then you have to meet or exceed a target number. Okay. Fundamentals. Let's talk about target numbers first. An easy target number, remember we're rolling d12s, where the average will be in 6 to 8. Easy is 3 to 5. So this is described as something that might be moderately hard for an untrained person, but it's trivial for someone with basic training. They give us some examples. The examples are telling a white lie. You look nice today. Finding basic shelter in the woods. And fixing a toaster. Moderately hard for someone who is untrained. My toaster's not working. I'm going to look at it, but I'm not really sure what to do. But is trivial for someone with training. Ah, your toaster's broken because of this thing that's broken in your toaster. Please give me a minute and I'll fix it. I've had some survival training. Where should I, hang out in the woods? What side of the tree should I rest against? So, the examples seem to match how difficulty is described. Normal, 6 to 8. Tasks that require some concentration for a trained person. It doesn't give us any description of what the untrained person's reaction would be to this difficulty, which is interesting. The examples are throwing a rock through a window across the street. So the difficulty there being hitting the window. Racing a motorcycle through traffic, and fixing a car. So I'm leaning toward thinking, just by looking at this chart, that maybe the untrained person shouldn't be attempting these things. But then again, maybe your reaction to looking at that chart is maybe it's possible for them to get lucky. Hard, 9 to 11. Tasks that are challenging even for someone with extensive training. Identifying a brand of rifles from the sound. Winning a marathon, performing a ritual war dance at a wedding. And then very hard is 12 or higher. And it is possible to go higher than 12 because of the bonus effects and things. Tasks that are almost impossible even for a senior agent. If you need to roll a skill when you have no levels in that skill, you roll 2 d12s and you must choose the lower one. Okay. If the target number is 6, you would succeed if you roll a total of 6. You would gain an additional effect at 12, 18, 24, and so on. You should expect to see either a straight success or a success with one additional effect, considering that we're rolling a d12 and the typical modifier might be to gain a +3 or something along those lines. That seems to make sense. When you roll a skill check, you pair the character's skill with a suitable basic ability. Okay. Skills are the different fields of knowledge your character possesses, and they are measured in dots between 1 and 3. The number of dots you have is the number of dice. Your basic abilities are measured between -6 to +6, and one of them is usually used when making a roll. They are Constitution, Dexterity, Focus, Wisdom, Wits, and Charisma. These can vary between situations, and so you might have a roll like Focus plus Drive. If you were in your car and you're not rolling Drive to see if you can operate the car, the reason why they're pairing Focus and Drive would be for you to jump your car across a gap. Or Wisdom plus Drive might be suitable for identifying whether the vehicle is too heavily loaded to make that jump at all. So this is one of those systems where you have, things to pair together, and they can be mixed up and matched and paired in any way that makes sense in the moment. Not a lot of thought is required. So the difficulties, the target numbers, it's a pretty simple range to remember, pretty easy examples to remember. And then the pairing of skills with your attributes or your basic abilities, that's pretty straightforward as well. Constitution, Dexterity, Focus, Wisdom, Wits, and Charisma. Okay. We talked about the bonuses and penalties, the support and cripple effects. These are always +3 and -3. If you manage to double the target number or triple the target number, then for each time that you do that, each time you beat the target number by the target number, you can choose an effect level or a success level. You gain an additional effect, and it's described as being powerful. We talked about it a little bit last time. It says there's a story effect. You manage above and beyond what you're trying to do, and you will collaborate with the game master about what the effect will be. Example, you obtain additional information on a convince roll, and you get an opportunity to lock the door behind you during an escape, or you make a daunting jump look easy. So we have different kinds of things. Getting extra information beyond what you were looking for, because this is performing above and beyond. You are trying to escape, and you've created an advantage for yourself, not just maintaining or extending distance, but slowing the other person down by locking the door, or showing off. A support effect could be earned, which is where you could bestow upon yourself or to someone else in your group a +3. You could also choose the opposite, where you could bestow on someone else, I don't know why you would do it to yourself, a -3. Or you can do more damage in combat, which may be the one that comes up more often. Okay. Timing. It says time is cut up into chunks designed to mimic paces in other dramatic media like plays or movies. It's a strong signal about how the game is supposed to operate. We've got a round. This is the time it takes a character to do something quickly. Combat is usually measured in rounds. A scene is a more uncertain amount of time, or maybe they want to say it's an elastic amount of time, and they ask us to think about a movie or a TV show. A scene is typically set in a specific place, and the characters have a particular task there. And each scene has some specific piece of information for the viewers or another specific purpose, like showing you clues to how the protagonist thinks. No scene should exist without purpose. A session is a game night. From the time you arrive at the table to the time you leave is a session. No in-game mechanics rely on this, but the game master is supposed to hand out experience points at the end of a session. The most extensive scope of time, other than campaign, is mission. And a mission is a task handed to the characters, and it usually starts by getting a mission from HQ, and a campaign is made up of a number of missions. And they describe combining a number of missions together as being a continuous story. They don't talk about it in terms of things like arcs, narrative arcs, or character development, but a continuous story perhaps made up of different events and the effects that those events have had. Okay? Which means that, whoops, on the next page, page 17, combat begins. All right. There's a text box here. Agreeing on time. The number of rounds it takes to do a specific task should be at least somewhat clear to the player undertaking them. It's no fun if the player starts to climb a ladder in a fight thinking it would take 2 rounds, and those 2 rounds become 10 because the player and the GM had different thoughts about the height of the ladder. It's a funny example, but doesn't make it less true. So in other words, we're talking about being clear about the stakes, consequences, what is required. Again, description. So this is a game with initiative. When a fight starts, all characters will have to check wits plus check conflict on a target number of 5. Each player tracks their own initiative total. Then from highest to lowest number, you spend success levels to get information about the situation. Each level spent lowers the spender's initiative by 5. Then, in order from highest to lowest initiative, each character gets to take an action. So this is a variation on what I call acting best. So we have roll, total, declare, organize, receive information, make a decision about what you're going to do, and then implement. That's the cycle of combat. If a player wants to lower their initiative, such as to throw a grenade after your friends and cohorts have fled the scene, you can choose to change your number to a lower one before you take your action. Obviously, you can't, improve it willy-nilly, but you can just decide to go at your best initiative or any time after that. Other actions. During combat, characters are free to take any action they want as long as it's their turn to act. A round is enough time to shout a few words, make an attack, and move a short distance. If a character wants to do other things, it's up to the GM if it takes one or more rounds. So this is a game where the Game Master is the central clearinghouse of information for what's happening in the entire combat. And if what you want to do feels to them like it's taking too long, they should make you aware that it's going to take longer than maybe you want. There are some people who are going to react to that negatively. There are some people who are going to want more control over the scene. They want their control of their character to extend into the world around their character. And if this game comes into a group where some people feel that way and some people feel like the zone or the locus of control for a character is simply what they are deciding to do, not what's happening around them, then there may be some friction. And so again, this is a point to talk about. There's enough detail going on. There are enough decisions. There's enough emphasis on description. There, uh, there are enough moving parts that it is not only polite, it's also an example of good play to follow the advice of the people who wrote this particular game for getting the most out of it, I think. Okay, veterancy. Reactions. There's one way a character gets to act outside their turn, doing a reaction. After a character, PC or NPC, has stated the action for their turn, but before making any rolls, a character can spend a point of veterancy to make a full turn's worth of actions before initiative starts. That's kind of cool, right? We think about um, movies and television specifically, which is something that this game is using as a touchstone to get us to understand what the outcome of play should be. Then having our veteran characters be able to have this kind of operational oversight, that's kind of cool. And we can justify this through a variety of means, such as planned responses, lots of training, they've been in this situation before, etc., etc. Okay. So we have a couple of pages we've got attack actions, and talks about attack and defense, comparing numbers and applying the effect. Okay. We have another box called Spicy Narrative. I attack the wax man with Dex plus martial arts is not what you should aim to say during gameplay. You should instead aim to say something like, I take a short run up, leapfrog over the dining room table, splattering food and breaking plates, and land on the waxman, tackling him to the ground. An attack does not have to be singular either. You could say, I light up the room with a hail of bullets aimed at the mold beast. In this case, a GM might argue Dex plus firearms, and if the roll is good, the mold beast might take 3 to 4 bullets in its amorphous body and spray infectious mold over the room. The damage inflicted is still the rolled result. We just spiced up the description a bit. This is a little bit perilous, what's been described from my perspective. One, it's one of those things that people struggle with, to be able to narrate more things than there are rolls. It seems to be a default out there for a lot of players that if you roll the dice once, then you're narrating a punch or a cut or a shot, something like that. And it's a difficult habit to break, that you can narrate more activity than that taking place within the span of time. There are some games where a round is a minute long, so the idea of there being, one punch or one sword stroke or something like that all occurring in a minute, really stretches credibility. So, credulity. So, these are elastic rounds. So, if you're going to attack, go ahead, spray the room, chuck a couple grenades or whatever. But don't expect the damage to be increased by your description. Damage is dependent on the roll. This I like. This works. Right? So we want better description. Better description leads to things like support effects, a +3 to your roll, which means ostensibly you'll be doing more damage, so this is good, right? Where do we run into trouble? Listen to the description again. I take a short run up, leapfrog over the dining room table, splattering food and breaking plates, and land on the waxman, tackling him to the ground. This has happened before you rolled, and in the moment, we don't even know what you're going to be rolling, because that determination, although you can suggest, that determination is coming from the game master. So you want to roll Dex plus martial arts, so you describe something that requires Dex and martial arts. And you throw in some colorful stuff, hoping to get, a bonus. But, listen to that last part again. Tackling him to the ground. This part assumes success. Splattering plates, who cares? This is color. We know there's plates. We know you're going over the table. It's not like there's lots of room for you to do your acrobatic maneuver across the table. It's logical. It's consistent. It's showing your awareness. I don't think we should have any problem with that part. But we have assumed the result. Tackle successfully. Take the target to the ground successfully. And then the dice are going to speak. And the dice could very well tell you that none of those things happen. And so we've run into the wall of premature imagination. You say, I do this! And then the dice or the game master or another person says, no, you don't! And then you feel deprived or denied of this colorful outcome that you've described. So this is where player skill comes in. How do we describe things? Right? How far can we go? We can go right up to wherever the roll happens. This would be fine after a successful roll. If this is how you as the player want it to come out, the dice are sitting there in front of you telling that you were successful and you did a sufficient effect to knock the target down, go for it. But if the dice haven't been rolled yet, this is going too far. So what should this example read like? I take a short run up, leapfrog over the dining room table, splattering food and breaking plates, trying to land on the waxman, hoping to tackle him to the ground. I'm communicating my intention. The dice and whatever other factors are involved from the environment, the other characters and things that are already in motion. Maybe there's a cripple effect coming my way from a previous roll by the Waxman, right? I state my intention, and then we'll see if my intention carries through into outcome. We must be careful not to make the narrative too spicy, lest it lead to sadness and heartburn from premature imagination. Okay, so this section is several pages long. We're not going to go through the whole thing. That's why people buy books, right? So we compare our numbers. We apply the effects. We have grit, which deals with damage tolerance. We have health. We're going to have to check for consciousness. If we run out of health, then consciousness checks are made. We have a wound threshold, which is grit plus 3. We check for wounds. It says the nature of the injury is between you and the game master, and the severity should match the level. A level 1 wound is a bit crippling, like a broken finger or a bleeding cut in the forehead. A level 2 wound is worse, like a broken limb, a massive concussion or fractured ribs. And a level 3 wound is almost fatal. Not a lot of wound levels. Death. If an individual receives a wound while they are unconscious, they die. This ends a lot of arguments about that some people can have. Healing. Number of ways to heal. On page 21, we've got how it all came to pass. We have today. The history of the multiverse, the day it all changed, the aftermath, working together, a time of collaboration and discovery. Wow, a time of collaboration and discovery is a ton of pages, whereas that previous material, how it all came to pass, is quite short. Okay. We've already talked about this stuff, and it's a pretty exciting read, right? So I'll leave that to you. How do we want to end today's installment? Well, the next section of the book is all setting material. So I think let's make that homework, shall we? If you've got the game, read through the one-page details about the different worlds. Sometimes you get 2 worlds on a single page. And that takes us all the way up to page 46, where the player's handbook starts, and we can talk about building characters. Once we talk about building characters, then we're going to go back into the system chapter and start comparing what a right out of the book character can do, what we can expect them to do, what we can expect them not to be able to do, and then go back and look at the mechanics again and see how it is that we should be communicating with each other about our actions, how we should be coordinating with other players at the table in order to gain and earn, pass on different effects to be more successful as agents of Concordia. Okay, until next time, take care.